Cold and windy today. We're just getting over 3 days of rain, which was a good thing, and now we have a cold front coming in from the north by northwest. That's where the cold fronts usually come from, and going to get colder tonight. That's okay, it's winter. I'm just looking for some video to take for this weekend, and I thought I'd go down to the wood shop and check out the projects they're in the middle of down there. I know they're making pallets and lids and bottom boards. It's a separate building. We have our shop separate from our honey processing facility, which is a good thing in a couple of respects. For one thing, if a fire was to start down there, the buildings would be separated. Heaven forbid that ever happened, but it could. And the other thing is we don't want all that sawdust and dirt stuff happening in our honey processing facility. So I'm really glad I have separate buildings for that. And today's all about pallets. Making lots of pallets. Alright, we're going to do some video on some pallets here. Pallet building. John, you got to do a good job for the video.
Okay. Right.
You notice I always say John, I never say Selena. I don't want to pick on her. She's too sweet to pick on.
You know who number one is.
Okay. So we dipped this pressure treated 2x4 and 1x6 in a combination of diesel and used motor oil. It gives it extra protection. If you just use pressure treated lumber in this area, within 5 years, 6, 7 years, it's rotting, it's going bad. But when we dip it in that combination of diesel and used motor oil, we get a lot more life out of it. We did it a while back. It's been sitting in the sun and the rain for a while, so it's dry to the touch. Quarter-inch crown staples, 1 inch in this instance. Jason,
yes, sir.
We got 2 different staple gun brands here. Which ones do you like the best?
I like this.
They're both good. Each one has a benefit. This gun shoots very well. It has a little extra weight, which I think helps set the staples very good. This gun shoots very well. It's a little lighter. It shoots maybe a little easier, but you have to be adamant about holding pressure on it so it sinks the staples. Other than that, this is a superior gun.
That's a Metabo.
Metabo, yeah.
And that one's a rigid,
Metabo,
yeah. Metabo has good stuff. I like their grinders. Of course, pressure treated for the strips. These particular pallets are being made with a 3/8 strip. A lot of guys use 1/2 inch or 3/4. I prefer 3/8. Hard wood, isn't it, John?
Oh yeah, no, it's hard. Yeah, if you don't watch out, it'll shoot out between those layers.
Yeah, it's helpful to keep the staple gun straight, square, in relationship to the piece that you're building. So if you look closely, you can see that Jason has notched out the center boards just enough to receive the W clips. Got a W clip? Yeah, let's get a close-up of that. You can see that it's just recessed just enough for the W clip to be a clean right there on that corner. Now the reason we do that is because you can put the W clips just on the board without that, but it creates a crack under the box that will allow hive beetles to lay eggs under there. So we like to make sure the box is sitting on the wood, so we recess that a little bit. Pre-drill the holes, make sure. Hard. That's hardwood. That Douglas fir is good wood, but it's harder to nail. So these holes are 5/8 of an inch, and there's a reason for that. Okay, hold on just a moment,
Yep,
John.
yep.
So the reason we go with 5/8, these are rain holes, of course, to let the extra rain out. The reason we go with 5/8 of an inch, if you make them smaller, the bees tend to plug them up with propolis wax or whatever. And if you go larger than 5/8, then the bees try to chew them bigger, and even rodents try to get up through there and chew them bigger. So over the years, I've settled on 5/8 being the right size hole. At least in our region, for what we do, I like 5/8. Okay, go ahead. So they've got a jig built here for putting the pallet together, the 2x4s and the 1x6s. It's simple. There's nothing magic here. We just have blocks that'll hold the 2x4s in the perfect place while you assemble the 1x6s on, and they turn it over and put the plywood on with the nail gun. Well, looks like you got about 12 done. We're doing a total of about 100 in this batch. I'll keep you busy for a day or so. Okay, so we're putting 2.5-inch screws up through the bottom to hold the 1x6 on. And then we're using 2-inch screws to screw down those W clips. And they're number 8 for the 2s and number 9 for the 2.5. They're Torx head. They're good. They're deck style screws. They've got a real good coating on them. This is high quality screws. Got to use good stuff if your pallet's going to last you 10 or 15 years. And then to nail the plywood on, we use 3-inch ring shank nails in a nail gun. Let's see there. These are the nails that we put the plywood on with. Ring shank is important in my view. It keeps the nails from coming back out easily. Actually, what happens if it's not ring shank, just time and changes in temperature and moisture will eventually walk that nail back out of there. Expansion, contraction, that sort of thing. So that with the ring shank, you don't have that issue. So obviously we're putting a lot of time and effort and extra money in this pallet. We're using HDO plywood, which is going to raise some eyebrows, I know. HDO is expensive.
But worth it, right? I mean,
It's worth it in my view. You know, I built a lot of pallets out of a lot of different things. Advantech, pressure treated 3/4 plywood, and none of it lasts as long as the HDO. In fact, none of it even comes close. So if you're going to take the time and build a high quality pallet, I think it's worth spending the money. Sometimes you can get this HDO used from bridge builders or concrete form builders. Used HDO works fine. I've made hundreds of pallets that way too. And right now I don't have any access to used stuff, so we're using new stuff. We're really trying to do a super good job, and that takes money, it takes time, and time is money. But in my view, it's okay. It's better in the long run. This stuff will last a lot longer if you do a good job in the first place. And we actually, here's another point too. These outer strips are not dipped in diesel, they're just pressure treated, which is fine. That inner piece right there is the one that rots the quickest on these upper strips, because when you got the boxes separated by a 1/2 inch on those W clips, a lot of moisture and dirt and leaves and just whatever falls down there, and that board can be the first one to rot. So we actually, even though it's pressure treated, we dip that in motor oil and diesel too. One thing I want to point out is I like this gap between the end of the 2x4 and the end of the plywood, because it creates, when the pallets are touching each other on the truck, it creates a 1-inch air gap there, which is not only good just for airflow, but also on a hot summer night, if the bees are out on the landing board, they can really fight a lot if the landing boards are touching each other. Of course, a lot of times, a lot of guys, and us included, will leave a gap between the pallets. But if you got a narrow truck bed and you got to bump them up against each other, that gap is helpful. So good stuff, good wood, good products. I think using good wood is helpful. I think it saves money in the long term because you have less labor and you have less scrap, a little less headaches. So all good materials, looks good to me. we had a bigger shop, we'd have to get a bigger air system. I like an internal dust collector because it keeps the warm air in the building. In the summer it's great to just vacuum the sawdust to the outside, but in the winter you just be sucking out all the warm air. And we fill a 55-gallon drum pretty quickly, especially if we're using that machine right there. That planer fills them up real fast. On the table saw it's not too bad, we just change them out a couple times a day. We have people that take the sawdust that have animals and chickens. They like getting the sawdust and chips from us. This saw right here is sweet. It's very precise, it's very smooth. Takes a lot of the labor away. Before we bought this saw, we were just using a standard table saw, and we surrounded it with tables and pushed the plywood across the table saw and the tables. This one, that carriage kind of carries all the weight. It's very smooth and easy to use. I would not have bought one of these brand new. It's a $20,000 table saw. John found this used online on a app called Marketplace, and we were able to get it at a reasonable price. Paid $4,500 for it. I was happy with that. Kind of changed the way we do things. Less fatiguing, more precision, it's better in all ways. Pretty easy, huh, Seth?
Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Right here.
I'm going to point something out. Normally the rule in this shop is you cannot wear gloves around these tools. And we showed Jason having a glove on. It's because he hurt one of his fingers. So he's on the downside of the saw. He's not getting anywhere close to that blade. But highly recommended not to wear gloves when you're working a table saw, in my opinion. This is just a special instance. Yeah. What's that?
You want to see it? You want to see it?
No, we don't need to see your damaged finger. Okay, we got Seth helping us today. I got to put Seth on video because people don't believe he's still alive.
Yeah.
So he's still kicking.
Yes, sir.
He's helping us this winter because we have a lot of woodwork to do, and he said he could use the extra work, so he's putting lids together for us.
You want 4 or 5 in these?
4 would be good enough because you're gluing it. We're using Tight Bond glue. Tight Bond 2 or 3 works fine. And I've often said if the glue isn't oozing out the crack, you're not putting enough on there. And we just wipe it off with a wet cloth. We're using 1/4-inch crown staples. 1 1/8 or something like that
1
works.
inch,
You got 1 inch right now.
Yeah,
1 1/8 works good for this. 1 inch works too. It's the glue that's doing most of the holding, honestly. And of course these are pressure treated strips, because if you don't do that, they will rot. This is 3/4-inch HDO made out of Douglas fir, so this is really fine plywood. This particular brand comes out of Canada, which is fine. So we're putting a 71mm hole in the middle. That fits a 70G or a 70mm mayonnaise jar lid. That's how we feed. We're actually making lids without holes now because some people are asking for them. Not everybody wants that hole in the lid, and I get it. So these pieces of plywood have print on one side and no print on the other. The printed side is the thinner side. That veneer that goes on there, whatever type of plastic
like
that
paper.
is. Well, it's plastic or
Something.
phenolic something. Anyway, this is the thicker side. If you look at it very carefully from the side, you can see that this is the thicker laminate on there, so we want that up. We only paint the sides, we don't paint the top. I used to paint the top, but it's really not necessary. This stuff is very weather repellent, and of course after 5 or 10 years it'll be well weathered. It'll look like an old shingle or something, but it's still fine. At 10, 15, 20 years they're still flat. It doesn't warp. It's good stuff. So the dimensions are 16.5 across. We give it an extra 1/4 inch so it can hang over the box 1/8 of an inch on each side. And then they're 21 3/4 inches long. That gives you just the right amount of extra space under these little lips here. If you have really bad equipment where it's warped really badly, 21 3/4 may not be enough. You might want to go 21 7/8 or perhaps even 22. As long as you got good stuff, the 21 3/4 works really good. Okay, thank you, Seth.
Yes, sir.